My story goes back farther. As you can tell, there's an age difference. Uh, I chose abortion 46 years ago. I chose abortion in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, 3 years before Roe versus Wade. But it had been legalized in Georgia in 1970. My story actually began on my 21st birthday. All of us, I think everybody's over 21 in here. We all remember our 21st birthday. It is a time of celebrating with family and friends. It is a time filled with the hopes and dreams for the future. I was the exact opposite of that. You see, on my 21st birthday, I walked into a hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, and had an abortion. I was alone. I did not celebrate with family or friends. And I've never felt so alone in my life. And on that day, not only did my child die, but I died as well. My dreams for my future were shattered, and the door of my relationship with family and friends was closed. You see, I now had a secret, the very secret that Catherine was talking about. No one could know that I had done this. So as much as I tried to deny that day and what happened on that day, I saw myself and everything in my life through the filter of that day and that decision. I carried the shame and grief of that choice for 18 years, even though I married, and God blessed my husband and me with 3 wonderful sons, and I was active in our church and our community. You see, I was filled with self-hatred. I didn't have any love to give. I had a compartmentalized heart. I showed people the person I thought they wanted to see, and I didn't allow God or anyone into the broken chambers of my heart. As the sociologist Brené Brown says in her talk on vulnerability, without vulnerability, we cannot connect. Without connection, there can be no wholeheartedness and no joy. To let ourselves be seen, deeply seen, vulnerably seen, to love with our whole heart, to feel this vulnerable means I am alive. So if that is the definition of being alive, I was the walking dead. But then on my 38th birthday, God used my oldest son to bring me out of the tomb of self-hatred and isolation and into a place of hope, life, and healing. On that day, he came into the kitchen and he said, "Mommy, why do you cry on your birthday? Why won't you celebrate?" As he left the room, I realized that if I didn't let God into this broken place in my heart, all I had to give my husband, my 3 sons, my family, and my friends was my shame and my pain. So I cried out to the Lord on that day, and he heard my cry, and he brought me into a place of healing. It was a post-abortion restoration Bible study. There I came to experience God's heart, his love, and the forgiveness and freedom I have in Christ. Some of you may have experienced abortion. If so, Catherine and I would love to connect with you. For others, abortion may not be your personal story. So our stories may be going right over your head. So in order to bring it down to a heart level, I want to share a statistic with you. Catherine has already said this. I'm going to say it a slightly different way. 1 in 3 women in America, by the time they're 45 years old, has experienced abortion. So each of you has a family member or a friend whose life has been wounded by abortion. Or you have a son, daughter, grandson or granddaughter, or a friend that may deal with a crisis pregnancy in the future and face the decision of abortion. So as you understand the wounded heart of abortion, you can be an instrument of hope and healing that can lead them to the foot of the cross to experience God's healing in their life. Or you can be someone that can help a woman or man that's dealing with a crisis pregnancy and help them choose life. How do you do this? First, you must understand that women that have experienced abortion are wounded. The word cloud on the screen are many of the words women use to describe themselves following an abortion. Some deal with denial. They won't even think about their abortions because of the shame and the pain it brings. They numb their pain with alcohol, drugs, eating disorders, sexual promiscuity, and overworking. Some will get pregnant again, trying to replace the child they aborted, only to realize they're still financially unable and emotionally unable to provide for the child and choose abortion again. We have had women come through our group that have had as many as 6 abortions. So just imagine what would have happened if they had found a place of healing. You see, 1 in 3 women that enters an abortion clinic has already had a prior abortion. So that's why the healing aspect is so important. Some women are angry. This was my mode of operation. Because of their pain, they lashed out. Yet each is carrying a silent scream coming from an untreated wound. Some are depressed. They're trapped in prisons of regret. Some are high-functioning. They're your CEOs, your lawyers, your PhDs, your doctors, your nurses, your church leaders, and your mothers. They wear a mask. They appear to have it all together, yet they are hiding a wounded spirit. Many struggle with relationships, with family, friends, and men, fearing if they let people in and their past is known, they will be judged and rejected. So what do you do with this information? You offer kindness and hope. Pray for women who have had abortions. If a woman is willing to share her story, be quick to listen without judgment. Choose your words carefully. Abortion is not a political issue. It is a spiritual issue. Remember that each time you talk about abortion, someone is near that carries the pain and shame of that decision. Avoid defining abortion as murder or calling women murderers. You see, we're trapped in a pattern of self-hate. We do not need to be reminded of what we did. We live with it every day. We often think we're beyond forgiveness. We don't think we have the right to grieve the loss of our children. God created women to bear and nurture life. Abortion is the antithesis of that. When we choose abortion, we become life takers instead of life givers. So we carry our pain and shame silently, seeing our lives and our relationships through a filter of despair. So you can be an ambassador of hope. You can direct women hurt by abortion to a place where they can experience God's love and healing. I want to just give you a brief overview of our Bible study. We go through 3 basic phases: recognize, release, receive. The recognition part, we want the women to see where they need healing. We want them to recognize their loss and their hurt. We want them to see if they're in denial and know how they're numbing their pain. We want them to recognize the lies they believe about God and the truths about Him they struggle to believe. We want them to understand God's heart for them. As they recognize these things, they begin to come out of the darkness of denial and walk in the light. Now they can begin the process of release. They can deal with their anger and their guilt. They can realize that anger is a God-given emotion, telling them there is a wound that needs to be addressed. that their anger is coming from a place of fear and hurt. They can recognize whom they blame. In many cases, women have more self-blame than blaming others. With this self-blame and this inward-turned anger, they go into depression. We help them understand that forgiveness is the key to release them from their prison. As they accept the forgiveness God offers them in Christ and learn to walk in forgiveness, they can forgive others. Now they're ready to grieve their loss. We offer them a time to write down and share all the words that they have never said to their children. We give them the opportunity to give value and dignity to their child, the very thing that abortion denied. As they do this, they move into hope and acceptance, and they begin to live in the fullness of God's plans and purposes for them. As they experience this restoration that Christ brings, a great exchange occurs. As so beautifully described in the book of Isaiah, ashes are exchanged for beauty, mourning becomes gladness, despair becomes praise, and they become oaks of righteousness for the display of the Lord's splendor. What Satan has been using in their lives for evil, destruction, and death has now been exchanged into a powerful voice for life. They can now be redeemed life givers in their families, in their churches, in their workplace, in their community, and with their friends. In closing, I would like to challenge us from the words of a recent release by Toby Mack, a Christian singer. It's called Speak Life. Well, it's crazy to imagine words from our lips as the arms of compassion. Mountains crumble with every syllable. Hope can live or die. So speak life to the deadest, darkest night. Speak life, speak life. When the sun won't shine and you don't know why, look into the eyes of the brokenhearted. Watch them come alive as soon as you speak hope, you speak love, you speak life. So remember, when you want to be a voice for life, you must also be a voice of hope and the voice of love. Now, how much time do we have? We could open for questions if you would like. Oh, yes. I know, yes.
If I have a friend that's having abortion before, how should I approach her?
Thank you. Let me repeat the question. If I have a friend that I think has had an abortion, how should I approach her? Well, you started in a great place today, because you can just merely mention, I heard the most remarkable stories today. I'd love to tell you about it. You always begin with prayer, because God will establish the timing. Don't ever get ahead of him. It doesn't work. And so you pray, you humble yourself, and then you can use this as a means of opening the conversation. And Catherine, would you like to add something?
I was just going to say, I think I would just try to understand her pain and her fear as best I could, and then maybe research some opportunities so that when you do engage her, hopefully with love and kindness, you're going to her armed with answers and resources that can guide her.
My question is for you, Catherine. I know that it must be very difficult to talk to your parents. How did they initially react? What was that like for your whole family?
You know, I had spoken with my sister first before I told my parents, and she was understandably upset, but more coming from a place of feeling like she had let me down by not being there, which was not within her control because obviously it was a secret that I was keeping. But she never stopped encouraging me. She knew I was going through Bible study, and when I went to her and told her I was ready to tell my parents, she was there with me, right beside me. I wrote a letter to my parents, knowing that I wouldn't be able to probably get through my story. And I read it, and when I did, the first thing that they did was hug me. And it was obviously hard to hear, but it was more coming from a place of they hated that I had gone through such pain and by myself. It was not a place of condemnation. It was not a place of judgment. They had nothing but love. But in that, I also knew that they were going to need time to process this and grieve this. And I think that that is still something, maybe a few years later, that they're still wrestling with. But in my telling it, it allows them to come to a place of acceptance because they've lost a grandchild, and that is something that they need to be allowed to mourn. So,
Could they even go to a someone cares group?
you know, one of our steps towards the end is we have a little ceremony, a remembrance ceremony, and Lulie and I can talk about that more in depth after this, but I had the opportunity to bring someone to that class that night, and I chose not to because I had not told my family yet. But we always try to encourage our women to bring, people that are close to them, people that are support systems for them. But I would also encourage maybe having, your own remembrance ceremony within your family, and that's something that I would love to do with my family, and it's something that I've been praying through. So I absolutely think it's necessary to have that time to allow your family members to grieve.
And also, you can go to Rama International, and they have a special piece on a grandparent's pain. Because one of the interesting things we often hear, it's different, particularly if you have a child that chose to have an abortion and they haven't told you, you can't out them, but yet you are dealing with it. You can't force the child to go through a healing process if they're not ready. So there is a group here in Dallas, and it's out of Prestonwood Pregnancy Center, and it addresses the wound of the parent. And it is a study especially for them. So, yes. Yeah.
What about the man? Because I worked at pregnancy center, and we had men that would come in with their girlfriend or anything else that just wanted to keep the child, and she was not. So how do we deal with those men? There's many of them. So my concern as I was working with women and men, addressing that, because that's an issue that I think we don't do very well with, because, and there are men because it's so painful, and some you think walk away, but there's very many men broken within that never ever address it also. So I just wanted to mention that, because that's something I saw. Do you all?
Yes, we do. It's #1 in Google, too. It's called Forgotten Fathers, and it is a post-abortion restoration healing that Watermark also offers. There are other post-abortion restoration ministries that are coming up because people have seen this needs to be addressed. Frank Gray heads up the Forgotten Fathers at Watermark, and I love what Frank said. As he tells you his story, he says his girlfriend had 2 abortions, and following those abortions, just as God created women to bear and nurture life, he created men to provide and protect. And he said, when I was part of that abortion decision, I was in the fallen state of that, and I needed to be redeemed back in to being a protector and a provider. And so that was the great thing that he said happened with him, because he said he couldn't do relationships after that abortion. He would just go from girl to girl, because he said something had been taken away of who I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do, and the gift God had given me of protection and provision. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Kind of like I mentioned, most abortions are decided upon within the first 24 hours of a woman finding out she's pregnant. So I would first encourage her to slow down and take a breath and try to help her understand what her fear is based on. Maybe sit down and have her write out what it is that has got her so terrified about having this child, and help her understand where that fear is coming from. And then I would just pray with her, and I would probably take her to the nearest pregnancy resource group, sorry, I'm on board, pregnancy resource group, but I would definitely just try to get her to slow down because she's probably thinking 90 miles an hour about all the fear that comes with it. So.
And I just would add to that, I think having them slow down and get a piece of paper and write down what all of their concerns and fears are. Because when you're in a crisis pregnancy, you don't remember anything. You know, you're in a crisis. Anytime we're in a crisis, our memory is very short. But go with her. If you want to encourage her to choose life, then you travel the journey with her. Don't be sending her somewhere and let somebody else take care of it. If she's your friend, you love her, you want to help, or he's your friend and he needs help, then you're in for the long haul because this is not an easy road to travel. So if you're going to give advice, then you got to get involved. Okay, yeah. What we'd love to thank the Council for Life. Meredith Bentley, I don't know where she is, but she worked so hard and did such a great job, and we love you. And come and join us, and let's all make a difference.